Good morning.
Hello, everybody.
Здравствуйте всем.
And my test. Okay. So, Olga, I apologize for not getting my
Ольга,
notes
я
to you.
извиняюсь, что я не выслала вам
Sorry, I speak
заметки.
slowly.
То
Well, we have not very many people for class. Well, we'll wait a few more minutes. What's the weather like? And Olga, are you in Moscow?
Yes, I'm in Moscow.
What's the weather like?
Oh, it's very hot today.
Yeah.
Plus 30 degrees centigrade,
Oh,
above centigrade.
that's about 90 to 100 US.
Yeah.
We're going to be 108, 110. So maybe 35, 36 centigrade Wednesday. But
Wow, it's quite hot.
the hottest I've been in is 115 degrees. And interestingly enough, that's hot enough that planes can't take off safely from the airport because the air is not dense enough because of the heat. And so they can
Wow.
land, but they can't take off. So that really makes a mess for the traffic across the U.S. because Phoenix is an important hub. I think that's the only city that really has that problem. I mean, we do, but Tucson's not a major hub. Everything happens through Phoenix. So, well, Svetlana's in the subway. Hmm.
Oh, the only problem that we have in Moscow is maybe like fog or maybe like heavy rain
Uh-huh.
when the airport can't
Oh,
work
well,
good.
yeah. Wow.
But it's very, very seldom.
Yeah, same here. I've only seen the airport in Phoenix close a couple of times. Well, the only student, well, I'm not sure what to do. Oh, we'll have class and I guess we'll just take it from there. So I wonder if people didn't get the right link. What do you think, Daria? You think people didn't get the right link and that's why they haven't come to class?
I think so. No. Uh, Kate Kate said she is going to connect on Tuesday.
On Tuesday,
Katie, yes.
on Thursday.
Yes,
Not
Thursday,
Tuesday.
yes.
Okay. Well, I guess Mike and others are not going to connect today. So we need to wait for Svetlana to get where she can receive. Yeah, there she is.
Oh, yeah. Hello, everyone. Hello, the Venerable Sumati. Yeah, I'm here. I'm listening too. Just couldn't like fully engage. Just maybe in the 7 minutes.
Well,
Sorry.
we'll wait till you get to your apartment. Okay, so we'll wait a few minutes. I've been having trouble with my computer, the mouse. I have a Bluetooth mouse, and that's not connecting to my computer. So I have to use a different mouse, which doesn't have the same control I need because of my tremor. So that's been quite frustrating. Not sure why. No. So, Olga, are you going to be the translator for most of the classes or just occasionally?
I will translate occasionally because in some days I work, so I will just, when I'm free and I can, I will translate.
Okay. Well, I'll work with Svetlana to make sure I send my notes to the right translator.
Yes, but that's okay because I always read the notes before the lesson so
Okay.
as to understand what will be, and so it's okay.
Okay. Well, I condensed the course 9 course class notes down. So we'll see how we aren't going to need 3 hours. For some reason, I thought we would, but I've condensed it down pretty tight. I think I've taught this course this way, trying to jam it in between other things happening. So that'll be okay. Oh, there she is. Okay. So I'm wondering where the rest of the class, Mike isn't signed in. They all got the new time.
Yeah, there is like a message in the Telegram chat. So those students who joined the chat before, they got this message with the announcement of the class and the link. But we didn't promote this course, and it was not advertised, not promoted. So like new students didn't see announcements, and there were no like some newsletters with announcement of starting this course. So
Right, but Mike,
not widespread.
Mike and Katya and Katerina would all have gotten the email with the link, right?
Yes, in the Telegram chat where the ACI courses with Venerable Sumati, all those information is collected from ACI 7, I guess. there is an announcement of the class with the link and the time. And they are in those chats. Yes, Ekaterina, Katya, and Mike. And Katya asked me to tell that she can't join today, but she will be the next time on Thursday.
Okay. To confuse things more, let's go back to 10 a.m. for class instead of 9, because it may be that people can't make the 9 is in conflict. So if we go back to 10 o'clock, then you won't have to race home. And does that make sense? Yeah, let's go back to 10. I'm sorry to make it so confusing, but let's go back to 10 o'clock. Okay. Well, we'll get started and take it from here. So we need to do our opening prayers. So Svetlana, if you could do the mandala, please.
Sashi tuki jukshing mitok tram, rirapling shin degen padi, sangeshing dum mikte ulvargi, drakon namdak shinglat parshok. Idam gururat namandala kaniriata ya mi.
I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, compassion, knowledge, and strength, the Dharma, the enlightened side of truth, and the song of the community of realized beings. From the virtuous merit I create from the practice of giving with the understanding of emptiness, moral discipline with the understanding of emptiness, patience with the understanding of emptiness, joyous effort with the understanding of emptiness, concentration, wisdom, may I attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all living beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, compassion, knowledge, and strength, the Dharma, the enlightened set of truth, and the song of the community of realized beings. From the virtuous merit I create from the practice of giving with the understanding of emptiness, moral discipline with the understanding of emptiness, patience with the understanding of emptiness, joyous effort with the understanding of emptiness, concentration, wisdom, may I attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all living beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, compassion, knowledge, and strength, the Dharma, the enlightened side of truth, and the song of the community of realized beings. From the virtuous merit I create from the practice of giving with the understanding of emptiness, moral discipline with the understanding of emptiness, patience with the understanding of emptiness, joyous effort with the understanding of emptiness, concentration, and wisdom, I will attain the state of a Buddha for the benefit of all living beings. Okay, so this is the start of class 9. This is on the ethical lifestyle. So purpose for course 9 is to study the Buddhist version of ethics, how to lead a moral and karmically productive life. Why do we want to do that? Well, if we're trying to see emptiness directly, that's going to be critical. And if we want to reach nirvana or higher, we're going to need to study ethics and understand ethics and infuse ethics into our daily life. So we want to reach nirvana on our way to Buddhahood. So what's a good definition of nirvana? From course number 2, the refuge course, nirvana is a cessation which comes from the individual analysis and which consists of having eliminated the mental affliction obstacles in their entirety from your mind stream. So individual analysis refers to realizing the 4 Arya truths one sees after seeing emptiness directly. For this course, nirvana is escaping from samsara, not just this apparent world around us, but also our own mind and body. We have to remember samsara is not a place. It is not where you go and just sit in full lotus and think good thoughts. Samsara is escaping this world of ignorant thoughts that lead to suffering. Now, you still have bad karma ripen in nirvana, but you don't respond to it. You don't have a mental affliction to it. And that's the major difference. Our body is suffering because its impure causes it ages and falls apart. Our metabolism produces urea, which the kidneys have to filter from our bodies to keep us healthy, and that can fail. Another view of samsara is our minds are never satisfied. We have the three sufferings, which constantly beat on us. The suffering of suffering, just typical pain. The suffering of change, and the pervasive suffering. I like to teach the pervasive suffering is not just that we're dying the minute we're born, but we don't know what karma is going to ripen next. And I think that to me is the more interesting. I don't see things scary. I think the most interesting thing is we don't know what karma is going to ripen next. But we have to be ready for it and ready for a response to it. That's the part that intrigues me. We have to be on our toes. So what is our response? What do I mean by the appropriate response to something that happens to us? What I'm talking about there is what I call my karma. It's not my karma but it's my karma so. When you catch yourself saying it's my karma but versus it's my karma so this is what I need to do. I need to respond with wisdom. I need to respond with the three spheres. I need to respond knowing that my response is, how can I put this? My response is critical because, like I like to say, the past is your present, and the present is your future. We have no control over the past. We do have control over the present. So by having wisdom in our response in the present, then we make the future that we want because we're not responding ignorantly and setting new seeds for unpleasant results. That's really hard. It's hard to do. But I find myself thinking about catching. Well, for instance, the problem I'm having with my computer mice. Out of the blue, they stop working. Well, why is my computer doing that? Well, I can get angry at Microsoft. I can call and get mad, or I can realize that it's coming from my past karma in some way related to helping others. And so I need to keep that in mind as I respond to this problem. I need to respond calmly, knowing where it came from, knowing how I don't want it to happen in the future. So I really think a huge part of the ethical way of life for me is simply being sure that my response is ethically driven instead of emotionally driven. So Geshe uses a perfect job turns to boring, a perfect boss develops habits that are less than perfect. So we're never satisfied. Stop and think about it. And let's try this. Let's stop and think about an example where everything was good and then it got turned bad or turned unpleasant. What would be a good one for me? An example. I don't have one. Svetlana, can you think of an example of something that was working fine and then it went from being good to bad or unpleasant? Trying to think, I can use my computer, but trying to think of a good example of having to catch myself. Well, I can use my computer. The fact that the mouse doesn't work, it works and doesn't work, I could respond to that with, well, first of all, I replaced the battery in one of them. It was a lithium-ion battery, and that took some doing with my trimmer. And I fixed it, and it should have taken time to recharge and last for a week, but it's not doing that. So I called the company, and they have no good answer. But I found myself not being mad about it. I realized it was an inconvenience that I, like my Parkinson's, is an inconvenience. Lately, more of my life has been about inconvenience than anything else. So knowing that it's coming from inconveniencing others and knowing that if I want to continue to have the problem, I just need to respond ignorantly. I'm trying to solve the problem mechanically on my own. But I'm not getting mad. I'm not blaming anybody else. And so I'm not doing it's my karma, but I'm doing it's my karma so. And I think if we go through our day and think about it in that sense, did I think today something was my karma, but it's not a big deal? Versus it's my karma, so I've got to react with wisdom. I've pretty much gotten over the knee-jerk response to karmic events. I have to say I'm very pleased with that. Okay. So we think we control everything in our life. I don't think that, but Geshe mentions that in his notes. And we really control. The only thing we control is our response to events as they occur. And we only have control if we've been studying the three extraordinary trainings and realize why that control is so important. So another definition of samsara is anything that upsets your peace of mind, which is also the definition of a mental affliction. Nirvana is reaching a state of mind where you are incapable of having an unpleasant thought ever again, no matter what happens to you, no matter how someone treats you. Your mind does not get upset. But to get there, you need to perceive emptiness directly. Direct perception of emptiness is not nirvana, but it's the doorway to it. There are 3 trainings that are necessary for the direct perception of emptiness. Usually they're presented in the forward order, but for some reason Geshe presents them in the reverse order. The 3 extraordinary training of wisdom, the extraordinary training of meditation, and the extraordinary training of ethical living. The extraordinary training of wisdom is taught in the Abhidharma. The extraordinary training of meditation is taught in the sutras. And the extraordinary training of ethical living is taught in the Vinaya. And in the Vinaya, we're going to be using an example, a pond in which the water is perfectly clear, perfectly still. When water in a pond is perfectly clear and perfectly still, the moon can reflect vividly off the water. If that thing called emptiness is going to reflect on the surface of my mind, the mind must be totally quiet and pure. In order to be able to reach a deep state of meditation, which is necessary for the direct perception of emptiness, your conscience must be clear. So again, to reach nirvana, you must perceive emptiness directly. To perceive emptiness directly, you need to achieve a high level of meditation. To reach this high level of meditation, you need to lead an ethical life. So morality leads to meditative concentration, which leads to wisdom. A professional in any endeavor is someone who has worked hard to become the best they can, athlete, pianist, or whatever, not by wishing, but by hard work. For meditation, this means 1 to 2 hours a day of working on your mind, not just jumping in and jumping out. But this then requires a lifetime of moral living, so your mind is not distracted by the myriad of non-virtues. So ethics is the base, the foundation of these 3 trainings. So just what is an ethical life? This is what we're going to be talking about over the next 8 or 9 classes. Ethical way of life was taught in the Vinaya collection of the 3 baskets: vowed morality, sutra training on concentration, and the wisdom, Abhidharma group of wisdom sutras. To study ethics, we need to know what is virtuous and what is non-virtuous. What's a virtuous deed? We have an audience of 1, so go ahead, Svetlana.
Those deeds which bring pleasant result.
Right. So I have a question that wrong mouse. I have a question here that I'd like to stop and think a little bit about. And Olga, jump in, or Daria, jump in if you have a response. What's the difference between virtue and merit? A virtuous deed and merit? I don't have an answer. I've been trying to find an answer in all the sutra literature I have on my computer, and I cannot find a direct answer. As if there is, there may not be. There may be synonyms. It seems to me that a virtuous deed brings a good result, but you don't talk about meritorious deeds. You talk about virtuous deeds. You talk about one collecting merit, the collection of merit and the two bodies that merit and wisdom make. But we don't talk about collecting virtue. I think I read recently that merit is a result of doing the first four of the six perfections with bodhicitta in your heart. But why would that not be? Can it be? Maybe it's virtuous. It's all virtuous, but it's merit when you do it with bodhicitta in your heart. Maybe that's the answer. So in this study of ethics, we need to know what is virtuous and what is not virtuous. And as Lama said, it leads to a pleasant result and eventually to nirvana and perhaps further. What is a non-virtuous deed? Leads to an unpleasant result. In his epistle, Tsongkhapa mentions that even in his time, very few people recognize the fact that the extraordinary training in meditative concentration had to precede the extraordinary training in wisdom, and that a person could not perceive emptiness directly without reaching a high level of meditative concentration. He then states by his time as well the fact that the extraordinary training in an ethical way of life was a prerequisite for the training in concentration, and this had already been forgotten. Geshe states, and when a clean and undisturbed state of mind is produced by an ethical life, I lost my train of thought, is necessary. He states that a clean and undisturbed state of mind is produced by an ethical lifestyle, which is necessary to see emptiness as a clear and undisturbed pond, which is necessary in order for a reflection of the moon to appear distinctly. So, the pond analogy, your surface of your mind needs to be as still and as untroubled by problems with morality. If you lead an ethical life and you try hard, the morality issues don't really come up. It's been my experience that I'm not confronted very much anymore with difficult ethical situations. Or let me put it this way. When I'm presented with what could have been an ethically difficult situation ethically, I don't even go there. I immediately go to responding with wisdom. I guess there's hope for me yet. Lord Buddha published over 16,000 pages on ethics. He published at least as much, if not more, on the subject of, the subject of ethics as he did on the subject of emptiness. And why would that be? Well, that's because the gateway to seeing emptiness directly is living an ethical life. It's very simple. If you can master an ethical way of life, you're going to make seeing emptiness directly, I think, happen more quickly. So, at the basic level, what are the virtuous deeds we're talking about? We're talking about the 10 non-virtues or the 10 virtues, depending on how you want to look at it. So for the 10 non-virtues, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, the non-virtues done by our body, speech, lying, divisive talk, harsh words, idle talk, and then craving, ill will, and wrong view. So killing is pretty clear. Try not to kill anything. Stealing anything of value. Value is a difficult thing to place on objects, especially if it's not your own. And sexual misconduct refers primarily to not interfering with another person's marriage or relationship of whatever kind. So stealing anything of value, that's how it reads. And I think there's a value given in the ancient Tibetan currency, which I don't have in front of me. So this brings up the subject of white lies. We've talked about this before. Is a white lie okay? Well, we have immediate 10 virtuous, non-virtuous deeds, and the fourth one's lying. So think of an instance where I'm thinking of an instance where I found myself getting ready to tell a white lie, and I stopped and didn't. And I didn't go around telling people that. I just stopped and I thought of the four powers. And decided that it's a lie no matter how my motivation, well, what's the term? Rationalization. You can rationalize your actions into just about anything. So when I find myself rationalizing a particular response, then I know that response is getting ready to be done ignorantly. So the ethical way of life for me at this point, in this particular instance, is thinking about the consequences of my action and set the seed accordingly. So it's not my karma, but it would be an example there. No, I had one, it just disappeared. It's catching yourself throughout the day. Find yourself, find how many times you think or say, it's my karma, but, versus it's my karma, so. And I seem to beat on this every class, maybe, or often. But I think it's a really important karmic reminder. It's not my karma, but in this case, I want to go 10 miles over the speed limit instead of 5. Now, there's an example. I don't know how strident the Moscow or state police are with speeding in Russia. But I routinely drove to New Mexico, to El Paso. When the speed limit was 70 miles an hour, I put my cruise control on 75. I never got in an accident. But I was driving over the speed limit. So I was breaking a rule. Now, how important is that? Well, if you look at it karmically, I've broken a rule in this life. It may be tiny, but it's going to keep growing, and that's going to come in some form in a future life. So I didn't give up driving 75 miles an hour because a 4-hour trip at 75 miles an hour instead of 70 miles an hour, I get there about half an hour earlier. But I was knowingly not following that rule. Now, there's no rule in the Vinaya about speed limits, so I didn't individually break a vow. But it's something to think of, because if you can rationalize that, you'll start finding yourself doing things that you know you shouldn't do, but you're rationalizing it to be acceptable. That's all a white lie is. A white lie is a lie that you've rationalized into being acceptable. What's a good example of a white lie? Good example of a white. No, that's interesting. I can't come up with one now. What's a good example? Hi, Tatya. Good example of a white lie. Oh, I know. A good example would be when I teach and I don't know the number of students. So I say, well, I give an estimate of the number of students. So let's say I'm doing a white tower soak, and I say, well, we had about 30 students, but I know we had 25. So 30 sounds better, so I say 30. But I know that's not true. So that's a white lie. I'm telling it not to get something. I'm telling it to look more important or sound more important. So how important is that? You could say to yourself, well, Sumati, big deal. There was 25 students and you rounded to 30. Well, it's still telling a lie. No matter what my motivation, I'm still telling a lie. And that has to come back to me as someone not believing me or causing a problem with my communications later. So why do I emphasize white lie? Because I've found in my past it was easier to tell a white people don't want to hear the details. So, for instance, someone asked me how am I feeling? And my answer these days is not so good. My posture is getting worse. I'm tired of not being able to taste or smell things. So I can say, oh, everything's fine, which it isn't. But no one wants to hear a list of what's wrong with me. So there's a dilemma there. So what I say these days is when someone asks me how I'm doing, I'm saying, well, my symptoms are accelerating. So I'm just dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. Now that's not a white lie. That's not a lie. That's what I'm doing. But when you ask someone how they are you really waiting to listen to them and hear everything that's wrong with them? Or are you just going to have when someone asks you, oh, I'm doing okay. Today's a pretty good day. Well, that wouldn't be a white lie either, because it has been a pretty good day. So really the point in this, for me, is to just realize how throughout the day your ethical way of life is constantly being tested. And it's not like you have to worry about robbing a bank or not, or something like that. It's the little things, ethical things that we do or don't do that are what's going to catch up with us, grow, and make for an unpleasant result in the future, whether it be this next life or the lives afterward. So what's another good example of killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, divisive talk? Well, we don't work anymore, so there's no idle talk issue. Svetlana, is there idle talk at where you work? Do you have to combat that?
Like gossip or
Yeah,
meaningless
gossip.
gossip? Yeah, I was considering that. And is it gossip when some colleague is expressing their attitude about another colleague, how they feel about what this colleague did to them? Is it gossip or just sharing of their opinion
Yeah.
about how this colleague is
It would be
behaving?
gossip if you were to say this other worker, you heard this other worker had this or that happen to him. It's gossip when it's secondhand. You're telling somebody something secondhand. So you might say to someone, "Oh, I can't believe how she responded to that. Did you hear how she responded to that question from her boss? That was stupid, a stupid thing to do." That's the kind of thing that's gossip, where you have opinions and you make opinions. It's idle talk. It's one way it's defined as idle talk because it's not getting you anywhere. What you're doing is pass along information that is secondhand and is not necessarily true. I don't know if you ever played the game telephone when you were a kid. You'd get, it usually happened at a party, and you play the game telephone with a circle of 10 people, and by the time the original conversation got to the last player, it'd be something completely different because each person interpreted the part of the game conversation in a different way. So if you're gossiping, you're interpreting something that's happened to somebody else without the full knowledge. And that's setting up the conditions for an unpleasant result in the future for you. Ill will is something I struggle with these days, and I don't think terrible things could happen to President Trump. But I will admit there is still a latent degree of ill will toward the man. So I'd have to say ill will is function in my life. So when my wife and I are talking politics between ourselves at dinner or with others, we try and keep in perspective the fact that karmically we know we can't wish ill will on President Trump. So we have to be very careful. I can't say, well, I hope his decision to send money to the Ukraine or not send money. I have to think. I can't think, oh, good. That means he's in worse shape, because it's my karma but versus my karma self. So how can I react to something he says in a way that's positive as well as advancing my ability not to have ill will? So how do you have an opinion about politics without ill will? Well, I disagree with President Trump. That's a perfectly fine thing to say, and there's no ethical issue there. But if you were to say, I wish that President Trump's tax bill didn't go through, well, that would be ill will. So how can I talk to people about politics? Well, here's how I get around it. I say I think it's okay to have an opinion. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion. It's what you do with that opinion that's important. So my opinion is what President Trump is doing is wrong. If someone asks me about it, I'll tell them about it, but I don't go around telling people I think he's wrong. So I can have that opinion. But if I start trying to convince others of that opinion, then that's where I'm generating ill will, and that's the ninth non-virtue. So we come down to the meaning of the Vinaya, the study of morality. Quicksilver, Nochu Dharmabhadra, he said, we call Vinaya, Vinaya, and we call discipline, discipline, because the subject matter of the scriptures on discipline, which is the 7 rules and all their friends, functions to discipline the mental afflictions and also functions to discipline your sense organs. If Vinaya is taught truly, then I, the Buddha, this is Lord Buddha speaking, then I, the Buddha, am there at the teaching. That's how important Vinaya, the ethical way of living, was through Lord Buddha in all of his teaching. So there are 2 root sutras that we use. The Sutra on Vowed Morality, the vows of freedom for a fully ordained monk, and the Sutra on Vowed Morality for fully ordained nuns. The early Sanskrit commentaries were written by Master Guna Prabha, Lopan Yiten Yu, in a 500 AD time frame. He wrote the Duwei Do, which is a sutra on discipline, which is actually not a sutra, it's a short book. So that brings up the three meanings of sutra. The first meaning of sutra is the open teachings of Lord Buddha. The second meaning of sutra can be a short book, or it can be one of the three great collections of Buddhist scripture. So we will use the following three commentaries in this course. The Essence of the Ocean of Discipline by Geshe. That's 3 pages, but packed with material. Daymaker by Quicksilver. There's a commentary on the essence of the ocean of discipline. And the wish-fulfilling jewel by Shoni Lama Shedra. Now it's interesting, this one was missing for decades. And John Brady found it, and we're going to be the first to study it in modern times. So in his letter to his students, Tsongkhapa, in the epistles to Nagwan Drakpa on the occasion of the ordination of the first monks of Galrong, if keeping this up as ethical way of life becomes for us something motivated only by a concern about how we look to others or about the honor and gifts we might obtain thereby, then the real point of ethics is lost. We must maintain an ethical way of life out of the feeling of renunciation, a true desire to escape our present suffering, the fact that our defective and suffering body and mind. So we don't participate in ethical living to look good, to look important. We're involved in ethical living because it's what's going to allow us, going to drive us to the direct perception of emptiness and eventually to nirvana and Buddhahood. So that's pretty much all I had for the first class. So let's take a 15-minute break and we'll come back for the second class. So what time is it now? It's 9:58, almost 10. Let's meet back here at 10:15.